Welcome to ExoNews TV. I'm Michael Sala. I'm delighted to have Scott Lemriel join us again on ExoNews TV to continue sharing his fascinating information about different groups of extraterrestrial civilizations he claims are interacting with humanity and their respective roles in improving or manipulating life on our planet. In part 1, Scott explained how advanced extraterrestrial technologies were used millennia ago to manipulate humanity by dividing our minds into conscious and subconscious elements. In part 2 of this series, Scott tells us how extraterrestrials have respectively attempted to create or prevent a nuclear war. He reveals what the series extraterrestrials told him about President Eisenhower's meetings with different groups of alien ambassadors, and how he lost control to the Majestic-12 Group in the final year of his presidency. Scott says a similar process occurred in the Soviet Union. Scott goes on to explain how President Kennedy had his own contact experiences with positive extraterrestrials and how he was assassinated on orders by the Majestic-12 Group with the assistance of negatively oriented aliens. Scott reveals that President Barack Obama, with the support of his advisors, began his administration with the intention of disclosing the truth about extraterrestrial life. However, according to Scott, Obama was prevented from doing so by mind control technologies targeted against his administration.
I want to, right at the beginning of this, I want to bring up this word HU, H-U. You can do you can do any kind of syllables, but on any planet, anybody that has vocal cords, even if they don't sound like God, when they utilize this vibrational frequency HU, it will vibrate that center in that being that is the core of where their consciousness resides. In human beings, what we call soul, or what beings from other worlds call Atma, A-T-M-A, or the atom of the Supreme, that Atma vibrates with the hue in a way that begins to line it up with its original source and its original mission to return to that source to benefit all that exists. That's our basic core mission as beings. The hue sounds like this. It's sent out on the outgoing breath in a comfortable tone for the individual. And then a person pauses for several seconds just to look and listen within. Then what I recommend people do after doing this for a few minutes, when they've gotten comfortable and relaxed, is to say a certain statement into the universe. And it goes like this: safely show me purposefully hidden truth on a grand cosmic multi-dimensional scale and the much greater knowing of the expansive love within it. When you do that as a form of prayer or a form of contemplation or meditation, you're sending something out very pure and very ancient into the source of where we came from and saying to it, I want to meet the beings, things, and events that will transform me and bring me back into awareness of who I am and have always been. Human beings don't need to evolve to a higher form on this earth where they're telepathic and higher and more brilliant later on. They did that billions of years ago elsewhere in the galaxy and were brought here. What needs to happen to people here is they need to be given back what has been manipulated away from them. This goes on other lifetimes, on other planets, in other histories. It is not a problem that began overnight, and people are suffering from this in ways that are just unimaginable. When you begin to become aware that you've been implanted, the odd thing happens. You begin to have power over the implants, even if they still affect your nervous system. You're not as easily affected by them. And it brings you into a vibrational harmony that allows for the possibility of free beings to meet you and provide you with even safer space to operate in order to go through the process of awakening these implants, surfacing those that are objectified, and then the power that was put on to keep them suppressed comes back to you. And it just becomes a memory. In which case, the being now remembers their telepathic function, their photographic memory returns, the longevity issue gets turned back on by beings from other craft. They take your board and put you in a chair and zip, change on a few genomes on your DNA, and now you're going to live 1,000 years. You could be 258 years old and look like you're 35.
Scott,
It's all great. Go ahead. Sorry, Michael.
So basically now what I'd like to do is to kind of bring it to the modern times, what is happening today, because I know a lot of viewers will be very interested in what way in which this kind of ancient extraterrestrial technology was used historically to kind of subvert and infiltrate and take over worlds, how the elites on our world, the bloodlines that were established in antiquity, were basically subverted themselves by this kind of extraterrestrial technology to be tools of this kind of manipulative off-world race, and in particular the reptilians. Now, if we bring it into the modern era, and I know a lot of people associate the modern UFO area with the sightings of UFOs during the Second World War in the 1940s, and then in the 1950s we had meetings between President Eisenhower and extraterrestrials. Can you kind of like describe, what happened then that may have given added impetus, or may have changed, or maybe brought into the fore what had been a historically developed infiltration to the present era, where we have much of the world now is under the influence of the United States?
Yeah, Eisenhower, first of all, I want to say, was a good man. He was a benevolent being. He was a 5-star general, helped end World War II. We all know that. But he was a good man. He had integrity. He had ethics. He was the last president of this country that had real power as a president until his last year, when he watched it stripped from him. They stripped it from him. He couldn't do anything about it. In his parting speech, which you can still see online, he warned people about the growing power of the military-industrial complex, lest the constitutional rights get thwarted, basically. He tried to say the very complex he helped build. He tried to warn people about this. But the thing people don't know is he was the first president, really, in modern times, to meet officially with extraterrestrials, both good and malevolent. The first group he met with were human, very uplifting to him, and they offered to straighten out this planet and its people. Back then, they offered to provide us with cures for diseases, straighten out the pollution problems, get rid of radiation. They basically required that he give up, and all countries give up, any nuclear industry, any radioactive isotopes, because they're just deadly, and they only use them either to make bombs or to boil water to make steam to drive turbines. It's absurd. That, the first reactors were created to get the spent fuel rods to refine into bomb-grade ore. Is that correct, Michael?
I'm not sure myself.
Yeah, well, Alamogordo, first nuclear bomb test, they had nuclear reactors they built to get the spent fuel so they could refine it, uranium, into bomb-grade ore and make an atomic bomb. They weren't for making electricity anyway. That was used as a commercialization of them later on. It costs 10 times amount in money to run a nuclear power plant, which is destructive, than it takes to run them by natural gas. So why are they still in place around the world when natural gas could run them for 10% of what they cost now, safely? That's the question people should be asking. Why? Why are they maintained when they're so destructive? You get one of these radioactive isotopes out of its lead container, everybody's dead in 3 days or a week. In a couple block radius, you're dead. Anyway, back to Eisenhower. The first group he met with, this is from my research with my friends from out of town, really directly, were benevolent ETs who offered to straighten out this world. Him and his generals were, you could imagine, quite edgy about this. You're meeting beings from other planets. You just got out of World War II. You just beat Hitler. You know about secret nuclear technology to make bombs that Hitler's scientists brought here when they were brought here, I think under paperclip, people call it. And the Russians got them. But they also brought with them a connection they had to the little gray ETs who were under the domination and control of the reptilian race, first of all. So we didn't just inherit these bright German Nazi SS scientists, which we pardoned and placed in power, like Werner von Braun, head of NASA. We inherited the connection that they had gotten their technology from prematurely as well. Both we and the Soviet Union inherited this group. So the same ETs that were giving them their science, the same ones we work with here. Now here's the thing. In Eisenhower's day, he was offered an opportunity to make this planet a spacefaring race way back then, join a great conglomeration of world systems. They would have given us spaceships, but we had to give up all nuclear bombs worldwide. That's their law, because outside of this planet, it's outlawed. They don't allow anyone to make radioactive isotopes, make material like that. If it occurs in nature, that's one thing, but they don't refine it to be destructive. That's contrary to their own conscience. They wouldn't do it. And they don't need nuclear bombs, and they don't run their spaceships on like Star Trek warp drives and things like that. So Eisenhower and his generals, after they were offered this, they said, well, we can't cause the Soviet Union or the people to give up nuclear weapons research. How can we do that? We have no power over them. Besides, it will leave us vulnerable to a foreign power or to an alien race like yourselves if you just turn out to be bad guys and wipe us out. We'll be defenseless. So if you look at Eisenhower's position, which he was, by meeting these benevolent beings, he had to turn them down initially. And the deal was that these guys would return over the years, and hopefully at one point we'd be ready to accept their offer. That is a deal they could make under a treaty, an extraterrestrial treaty between benevolent totalitarian races. It has to be done. Planets in the middle of that treaty. He met a few months later with another group. These were very haughty, very arrogant, imperial bloodline royalty, reptilian guys. The ambassador met with him, scared the pants off of Eisenhower, put the hair back up on the back of his neck, because these guys, their titles are extremely arrogant. And they said, look, we will exchange some limited of our extraterrestrial technology with you that you're seeking for the right to do certain genetic experiments on some of your populace. In other words, get genetic samples, take them aboard, get some blood samples, put them back with no memory, but they won't be harmed. This was the proposal. Eisenhower turned them down flat. Nobody in the room, nobody that met with them wanted to have anything to do with this group. But these guys were very clever, Michael. This ambassador was carrying a device on his belt, an implantation device. At that time, we were just in the fledgling stages of the CIA and the National Security Act that Truman started. People in this country, all over this world, were not experienced enough to have anything to do with such beings because they would be outthunk and outmaneuvered right on the spot. And that's what happened. They basically told Eisenhower when he refused to do a treaty with them, because they didn't care if we gave up our nuclear weapons. They didn't care if we had nuclear bombs. They said they would exchange technology with us. Eisenhower turned them down. You know what this ambassador said to him? If you don't make the treaty with us and our imperial world system, then we'll go to the Soviet Union and we'll make that treaty with them, and they'll become the preeminent power on Earth. Eisenhower was blackmailed into do it against his better judgment, and he was being influenced electronically, you might say, against his better judgment as well. What he didn't know was they were in the Soviet Union, representatives of the same group, at the same time doing the same thing on the premiere there. They pitted one against the other, and then we got into bed with the wrong group. Underground, secretly, classified, covered up, lying, deceit. Don't tell anybody. There can be nothing but a destructive outcome to that kind of deceit and dishonesty to a populace. That's the problem.
So the beings that actually manipulated Eisenhower and his advisors, these were Greys working for the reptilians. Could you just describe, who these beings were that actually forced the deal with Eisenhower?
It was much more scary than that, Michael. These guys got into a position. They already had a foothold here because of the little Greys that had gotten into exchanging technology with the Nazi scientists. Hitler was, let's put it this way, a reptilian kind of guy. That's why they went where they went. But you see, they don't care if Hitler was defeated. They just moved their allegiances over to different countries. And in a way, it worked out to their benefit, because Hitler wasn't going to win anyway. So they moved those allegiances and their technology and their advisors over to the US and the United States. And that happened after World War II. Eisenhower didn't die a happy man. He was very regretful of what happened through all this. I believe his granddaughter is talking today about what he told her before he died, about who he met with. And they were the reptilians themselves. Could you imagine meeting with one of these 9, 10 foot tall reptilians in a spaceship and you're Eisenhower? What you would feel like? I was terrified. And yet they were pleasant and smiling and saying, we want to give you technology. And he turned them down. And they basically impressed upon him that if you don't, we're going to make the Soviet Union the preeminent power. You're going to go under, because we're going to give them that technology. That's how they did it. That's how they work. In this case, it was direct. The Greys weren't involved in that meeting. Most of the time they worked through either influenced races like the tall Greys, that they either control indirectly or directly, or dominate certain factions of the small Grey races. They use them as front people to go out and do despicable things without exposing themselves directly, because the things that these other races do break an off-world treaty, and it's policed. So some craft have been shot down. Some were given to us in the United States and other countries intentionally, and some and reverse engineered. Both things happened. We recovered 12 craft here in this country. There is an interesting thing about all of this that is on the positive, very positive side, which is where I go into what my work is about. During the Cold War with the Soviet Union, there were 12 different incidences where both sides actually pushed the button to annihilate this planet through nuclear war. They were being encouraged in that direction. In each single case, although this alliance outside was not ready to directly intervene here, breaking the treaty themselves, they were allowed to at least prevent us from creating a nuclear war here, because people weren't in control of the free will they think they have. That's not fair. So each time they pushed the button, a couple of craft, not the bad guys, would hover over the bases here and in the Soviet Union and shut down their launch computers. They wouldn't talk to them. They didn't speak. They'd fly away, and as they did, they'd turn the launch computers back on with the launch mode shut down in both countries. And they did this over and over again. To that degree, they intervened here, but not anywhere else, just that point. So they've been keeping us from destroying ourselves all along for the last 60 years. What is changing now is they're stepping up their program from just keeping us alive, keeping us from destroying ourselves because of negative terrestrial influences, to beginning to neutralize the compulsive implants in those races out there in the universe and hidden behind the scenes here. Before we took our break and before we got into the second session, you asked me about Fukushima, right?
Yes. We will get to that.
Another very constructive.
Yeah, we'll get to that. So basically, you've described how Eisenhower's administration was basically forced or manipulated into making an agreement with reptilians that Eisenhower himself met. You also said that at the same time that they were doing a similar thing with the Russians. So are we to understand then that the Russians themselves, or the Soviet Union at the time as it was known, actually reached a similar kind of deal with the reptilians, and that beginning in the 1950s, that the Russian or the Soviet government actually set up its own technology exchange deals with the reptilian extraterrestrials?
That's right. But there's also a classified space program that's been created ever since NASA was born. In fact, before that, that's part of the National Security Act, part of the CIA, part of the way Truman had to bring this into being, because he was aware extraterrestrials were coming here. He was even more scared than Eisenhower. Truman was a great admirer of powerful industrial billionaires and royalty. He was put into power by those people. I should say, set up the National Security Act, which allows them to classify things, so the Supreme Court can't even look into it. The day that act was created, there was no power in the third balance of power in this country. The Supreme Court no longer had any effectiveness in a real sense because it couldn't look into classified matters. How do you have a balance of power when you've got a third branch that can't look at? But when that law was created, which allowed them to basically not tell people the truth about what they're doing about many things, whatever they wanted to do, which happened 3 weeks after the Roswell crash. 3 weeks, CIA, National Security Act. That was passed on, inherited by Eisenhower when he became president. Eisenhower was aware of the extraterrestrial issue as well. When you look at the way this came about, and the way we got fiber optics and cell phone communications, computer chip technology, microscopic or molecular sized computer chip technology now, the way we've got the telecommunication systems and satellite programs and spacefaring things in such a short period of time after World War II, it looks like our own scientists in one area of the world or another developed this and somehow compounded it and embellished it and advanced it over time all on our own. This is not true. These things are old technologies to people from other worlds. So we've been busy reverse engineering stuff that's either been brought here by accident, recovered from a shot down craft, or given to us. And then it's been funneled out through the military industrial complex and different companies to try to make commercial products out of it. In which case, when they do patent one and sell it, part of the profits are funneled back into a secret program to fund these projects that is off the books. It's not part of the Congress, or most of them. It's not accounted for in the budget of the United States. If you're going to run a classified space program separate from the public PR program of NASA, which of course you would do under a classified system, wouldn't you? Well, of course you would. Common sense. It's classified, so they do a heck of a lot to keep people from being aware of it. You'd want that space program and the technology you're developing to be able to be continually engaged in despite who's in the White House from any party, from one term to the next. You'd want it to be survivable in case there was a nuclear war and the cabinet the president was wiped out. You'd want something separate that is not done by elected people, by the people, that can maintain these projects despite who's in the White House or who's in the Congress. That's a classified system. The problem with that is the whole way to go about doing that was not invented on this planet. It was imported here by tyrant beings from other worlds who know how to lie to people best. Because the good guys don't do that. They don't lie to their populace. They don't have classified weapons programs they don't tell people about. This is indicative of totalitarian races, and it's indicative of our planet today. We have influences from both groups here.
So you mentioned basically that in the last year of his administration, Eisenhower lost control altogether. Then, of course, you had his speech, and then you had Kennedy administration beginning. Now, Kennedy appears to have actually wanted to change the way in which the system was being conducted, that he wanted to actually disclose things, or at least have this ET information shared more widely within the bureaucracy, and that he tried to confront Majestic-12 and the CIA in how it basically kept this information to itself, and that ultimately this led to his assassination. So was Kennedy being kind of assisted or advised to kind of do this, because there were stories about him having had meetings with positive extraterrestrials himself, and was it because Kennedy actually was working with these positive extraterrestrials that he was ultimately assassinated by the Majestic-12 and basically their reptilian overlords?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I wouldn't differ in that information one iota. This is the information, this is what I've gone and looked at and seen for myself, both down the time track and with devices and with people from off-world that can show me this stuff. They record it all. I mean, him and his brother had talked about this a lot. It wasn't because of the Bay of Pigs that he was killed at all. The cover-up, the highest classified area, 38th level in this country, that only a few men belong to, is about extraterrestrials, their technology, and the fact that they exist. That's more highly classified than hydrogen bombs. It was more highly classified than the atom bomb before we built the first one. I mean, it was already being covered up. They didn't have the CIA or the National Security Act, but they kept it quiet. Both of them wanted to disclose the fact that we have friends from out of town, from other worlds. He was a great fan of the Apollo program, but more than that, there was some, under treaty, he was able to meet with both sides. And ultimately, because he was trying to get back the power of the presidency, he was elected, and he wanted to be the president. And there were influences around him and in his cabinet that showed him he was not directly in control anymore. Eisenhower warned him about this. He consulted with him about this before he handed over the reins. What could Kennedy do? Eisenhower couldn't get it done. He's a five-star industrial complex, and then regretted it. Kennedy and his brother had plans to dismantle the CIA and reverse this whole decision. That goes against the tyrants from other worlds directly. That's a direct threat to them continuing to get secretly shipped materials and resources off the planet under treaty. That's what was threatened. And both of them agreed they wanted to get the power of the presidency back. The Attorney General, his brother, wanted to do it through illegal maneuvering. Both of them were killed one way or another because of their desire to tell the people the truth. That's it. And Majestic-12, I think it went a little deeper than Majestic-12 having them killed. Somebody off-world wanted that done. And then it was easy to get it done. And it couldn't be prevented at the time because this other group didn't directly intervene against other people's free will. They didn't stop a lot of murders that happened here. They don't have 10,000 spaceships overlooking all the little covert things that are being done in underground bases between Greys and reptilians and trying to get great technology from off-world, which so ingratiated the egos of our generals in this country and over in the Soviet Union. I mean, they flatter people's egos. Basic technique. Fluff their egos up. Tell them they're going to be elite. They're going to know stuff no one else will know. And then you've got them, or you've got the inroads to controlling them. That's the people they contact first. Their own kind of people. Here's the thing, though. In galactic history on other worlds, in the last 500,000 years, where these tyrant races have manipulated getting control of a planet, even under treaty, when they were finally kicked off those worlds, which was done, they would either destroy the populace or blow the planet up on their way out. This is in galactic history. So they can't win a war against the good guys. That's not the problem. They would lose. But they are very diabolical in what they do. When they get their property they think they control taken from them, they do everything they can to really mess it up. They brought a device here. It's about the size of a barrel. It's in a Brazilian jungle, which is one of the reptilian bases. It's underground. And if it's set off, this device creates a chain reaction with matter. I'm not sure how it works scientifically. You might know a lot more. You know a lot more about that. But it would cause the planet to explode from the core outward. And at the rate of speed it's traveling around the sun, that would become an asteroid belt that would stretch out and continue in the orbit of a planet, just like the one does between Mars and Jupiter. Our asteroid field was a planet that was blown up with such a device 6 million years ago. This is not the first event like this, even in our own solar system. So when you get these good guys knowing where this is and what these guys would do with it, they had to first come up with a way to neutralize that device should it ever be set off safely, and then neutralize the beings that would gladly set it off. But that's a problem that has to be solved outside of the planet amongst a number of world systems and Earth. It has to be done simultaneously, which is what the Sayres agenda is about, because that process, that program to finally liberate this planet is underway. And I wanted to get into some topics with you later about more of the evidence of their benevolent intervention in this planet.
I think we'll definitely get to that, and I just wanted to kind of like bring it now to to this president we have at the moment here in the United States, President Obama. At the very beginning of his term of office, there were a lot of people that were very enthusiastic about him and optimistic about the kind of policy changes he would bring, and that he actually would become the disclosure president. And I certainly was amongst a group of people that were thinking that this was really inevitable, that Obama was going to take this action, and that he had surrounded himself with people who were kind of knowledgeable about the ET subject. But of course, it didn't turn out. So, do you know, did the Ceres ETs tell you about President Obama? I mean, what his program is, what his influences are, and what might be happening in the last 2 years of his presidency?
I won't get into any predictions of the future, or certainly I won't get into predicting dates because I know better. The way this is unfolding, it's being done so carefully for the protection of you and your family and me and millions, billions of other people, really. Obama started out with the best of intentions. When he spoke on camera, when he was running for president, his eyes never blinked. He looked straight ahead, absolutely enthusiastic. He figured he could get some disclosure going. He had some advisors that told him this was possible. And they were, yes, extraterrestrial ETs who were benevolent. They were working in this direction. But if you notice, the moment he got elected and took the oath of office, there are people standing around him that look completely human, that wear a little device on their belt. Once he took the oath of office, all they have to do is just send a few implants into that man and surround him with some cabinet people that are under their control. And he'll change 180 degrees just like all the previous presidents before him, as soon as he gets in that White House. And yeah, that happened to him. Now, the interesting thing, just one moment, is he is aware that he's being manipulated to some degree. He doesn't know how it happened, and he can't control it. So when you're looking at someone like him, if you were a part of this extraterrestrial endeavor to help bring a change to this, permanent change to this planet for the better, then you're going to look at timing. And you're going to look at when you can extricate not just him, but many other people from this control in a safe way. If you're going to do that, there has to be a planned disclosure, not the false one that a hidden government's planning on releasing from the White House. And here's how that would go down, to give you a little prediction. There's two ways this can go down the next year or two. A disclosure where Obama or somebody gets up there on the podium and says, we've been working with extraterrestrials officially since after World War II. But they're all good, nice humans. And we've had to classify it because we needed to rebuild a destroyed world after World War II and get people to feel safe to be baby boomers. And 35 countries decided that was best. But now we're rethinking it. We really want to come clean. So we've been working with extraterrestrials in a classified space program. That's a false disclosure because they will maintain the classified space program and classified materials in general through that type of disclosure. People here will be no better off than they already are, thinking and knowing that extraterrestrials exist. They'll just be kind to the current administration, maybe the next one, for a while, so they can continue to manipulate what they're doing and get the pressure off, which is building. The other type of disclosure is where people off-world and on-world, both tyrants and people on Earth, are beginning to be changed from this implantation control. If that comes about, you'd have a disclosure worldwide where people all over the world are beginning to go through this transformation or a type of ascension into a higher consciousness right here on Earth. In which case, a lot of their higher faculties, which are purposely suppressed in the satellite system right now through the scalar wave technology, through HARP and other things, which is why they're doing chemtrails, by the way, to harness a system around the planet. It's a weapon, but it has harmful effects on people. The people spraying it are too controlled to care about that. They do it anyway. They go home to their wives, they get their checks. If someone came to you, Michael, and said, I'll give you $1 billion right now. I want you to get up in a plane with us and spray some harmful chemicals on people in a given city. Would you do it?
No.
No. These people do. Do you think they're in their right mind? Do you think the people ordering them are in their right human framework of consciousness at all? They can't be. They aren't just like they aren't taken over by evil beings, and possessed. Beings that influence controlling them are evil in what they're doing. But if you go back in history, all the biblical references to demonology and to demons really comes from people in primitive times who saw a reptile standing above them at 9 or 10 feet tall, who they commanded them to worship and sacrifice to them. These cultures in ancient Sumeria, in the Mayan and Aztec, all had these sacrificial characteristics to their culture, which was created by their overlords because they also ate people. It's not a pretty sight. It's not what people think it was or is. There were also cultures on Earth that were benevolent ET bases. Lemuria was one. Atlantis was a colony of Lemuria for a very long time. It was 2/3 the size of the Lemurian continent on the opposite side of the equator. And when Lemuria was destroyed, all of Atlantis went all but a small 500 square mile island, which remained when new continental landmasses rose up. This is a very dramatic, very quick event, not like people think. And that became the seafaring power over 75,000 years that became the colonizing power on Earth. And yes, extraterrestrial influences were in both places. Some predominantly better, more benevolent in some cases, some more negative in different parts of the world at different times. Some of that resulted in warfare on this planet from extraterrestrial influences. On this planet has never been destroyed from those wars. Other worlds have been. We want to avoid that. We want to there's people in other worlds who miss their relatives, Michael. There are people in bodies here unconscious of all they ever were that really deserve to go home. They need to be reunited in so many ways that are just astounding.
Scott, basically you mentioned different ways in which the benevolent ETs have intervened to kind of mitigate the kind of worst aspects of the control system that is being influenced by the more negative ET groups. And you mentioned the example of the nuclear weapons that were deactivated to prevent a nuclear war from emerging between the United States and the Soviet Union. Recently we had the incident in Japan and the incredible radiation from that. So you want to tell us about Fukushima and what you've been told in terms of the benevolent
Sure.
ET intervention there?
Yeah, I can tell you more than that. I'll give you some facts. Verifiable, provable facts. Do you remember Ted Marr, the radio show host that you and I were both guests on, Out of This World in Bellevue? He's just trying to call me, but I'm not going to talk to him right now. Can't talk to him right now. When we get off, then I'll call him up. But Ted is very concerned about the chemtrail spraying because he lived in eastern Washington, 3 hours east of Seattle, in a place called Moses Lake. There is a commercial airport there, which was rented by the Air Force, and they fly these 4 prop jet craft out of there, and chemtrails spray in crisscross patterns over the populace of Moses Lake 2 times a week at least. For years he was under that. Everybody in that town has respiratory problems. They end up in the hospital with respiratory problems every time they spray this stuff. He actually called the Air Force up at that airport and told them, what are you doing spraying these chemicals? There's sulfur, there's aluminum particles in it, strontium, barium, man-made isotopes that are in these particulate matter that they spray. We've measured it. We've had it tested in labs directly. We know it's I think he said, Ted, it was 8,000 times higher than safe levels of sulfur alone they're dropping in that stuff. Measurable in the lake, the soil, he had it all tested. I've even got the test result papers myself. He sent me a copy of them just for safety's sake. And he's put that on his radio show a couple of times, and a lot of people around the world would like to see that stopped because although it's being done for weapons research, really controlling people, it's very harmful, the chemical stuff they're dropping in those chemtrails, that the pilots and the people that are being ordered to do it really are too shut down to really know what they're doing, or they wouldn't do it. None of us would. You wouldn't, I wouldn't, Ted wouldn't, but they will. So, he's got an analysis of what the chemicals are. We talked to a particular scientist who is quite keen on this. I think he lives in Chicago. We sent the results back to, and then there's people that know the health effects or disabling effects that this stuff combined can do. And so the positive side of it is this: dealing with Fukushima. At one time, the radiation was measured off the coast of Alaska down to South America, and that 4 plants that blew their tops right off. The radiation from that was 100 times worse than Chernobyl. Millions died in Chernobyl, but millions have not died from Fukushima. It was far worse a catastrophe. The rods were blown clear up into the air. They didn't just melt in a dome. They were blown up. They allowed those domes to accumulate hydrogen gas, flood them with seawater. The containment begins to melt, it produces hydrogen gas, and then it ignites. 3 Mile Island, all the way back, the first nuclear accident in this country, would have gone up. But the way they solved that back then was by drilling holes in the top of the dome so the hydrogen gas would escape to keep it from exploding. They knew how to do that then, and they did not do that at Fukushima. They could have, they didn't. They let them blow up. Why? That's the mystery. That the radiation coming to the shore along the western United States was 60 rads and going up. And suddenly, I think 4 or 5 months ago now it is, we measured that water again. It's gone. All the radiation from Fukushima coming along the shoreline is gone. And when they tested the water, it showed 0 rads. The only thing that's still in the water is a little bit of an isotope that's indicative of the past testing of hydrogen above ground. That's still all over the world, but nothing relative to Fukushima was found in that water. There was a huge plume of this stuff coming ashore, was going to hit Washington State, and it never got there. It just vanished. Everybody in Japan should be dead from that disaster. People in China, people in the United States, but it didn't kill those millions. Some people have died from it, that's true, and it has affected some sea life. But there is work underway of a benevolent nature to keep these kinds of diabolical events from really causing the catastrophes they were designed to cause. That's very frustrating to a hidden elite that can't get things done the way they want it done. I can tell you this as a fact. The races I work with, the beings that are benevolent, the Say race, are never going to allow this world to have a nuclear war. That's one thing they will not allow. Because if they blow this place up, it will affect life hundreds of billions of sentient beings in parallel dimensions. Scientists here don't yet understand. And if you've got hundreds of billions or even trillions of beings out there in our Milky Way that can be affected by a nuclear war on this planet, does 7 billion unconscious people have the right to head their planet in destructive direction against that number who wants to change it and elevate it? All you need is the motivation in that great number to want to come here and actually change this place and have the way to do it. So that is really what the Say Raise agenda is about. This is why I put it out there. I don't do it for money or to be famous. I do it because I want to show people how to work with the Hue to get this protection, begin to connect with these beings and have these higher experiences, ascension experiences if you want to call them that, for themselves, and give them a safe way to do it, how to practice it, how to get it done. And that's the kind of thing that I want them to be connected to.
It's a very enlightened agenda that the series have, and I'm sure it's a great comfort to many to know that there are benevolent ET races out there that are basically mitigating the kind of more nefarious plans and activities of the global elite and those kind of ETs aligned with them. Now, in the Ceres book, the Ceres agenda, you talk about the Galactic Interdimensional Alliance of Free Worlds. So is that kind of like a galactic version of NATO, or is it a kind of galactic version of the United Nations?
I wouldn't compare it to NATO or the United Nations, because so much of what they do is influenced by laws. Their organization has no such influence on any of the world systems. On those world systems, they don't have money. They don't use it. Money is used by tyrants to control people. The idea of money and coinage, printed by a government and taxed, is imported from malevolent extraterrestrials. It wasn't created here. Royal bloodlines, the idea of kings and queens, that didn't evolve here naturally either. This is indicative of other races. So it goes back a long ways, and it goes off-world into galactic history, the real history. I'm a little out of breath, but had to move a car real quick.
No problem.
I would call it an organization of free, enlightened beings, meaning they live lifetimes like we do in bodies, but they don't have the problem we have. They aren't stuck in bodies. They can leave them at will, and on their planetary cultures, their children are encouraged to be able to do this from birth. The governments they have and the societies they have encourage this in all their people. They aren't ignorant of their other lifetimes and other worlds or their background. They bring a full awareness of this into the lives when they're born, and their people and their cultures reinforce it. Here's the thing that's so shocking. That's normal. That's just normal. And yet to people on Earth, that's an extreme state of enlightenment. But there are many world systems out there in the physical universe alone that operate this way. Have people in representation in the Galactic Alliance from world systems where anybody lies to anybody, or does covert research or weapons research that the people aren't aware of. That just doesn't go on there. That's the difference. So if you want to compare it to the United Nations, I'd have to say it's way beyond that kind of thing.
Is there such a thing analogous to the United Nations operating in deep space where, you know, all the powers, all the different factions and empires belong to and have their discussions?
All the empires belong to what?
You know, like for example, you describe different ET groups, alliances, and empires. You know, like the reptilians and the Ceres and the human-looking ETs. Is there a kind of, in the galactic level, a kind of galactic-wide association, something analogous to the United Nations that exists, or is it just basically, you know, you have on the one side the Galactic Alliance of free worlds, on the other side you have the reptilian empires and maybe other groups that just operate disparately?
The Galactic Alliance has a Galactic Alliance Council. There's 5,000 members in that council from over 5,000 world systems, and each representative represents more than one highly evolved populated planet. These are like, most of them are human or humanoid. Some are not human, but very advanced, very benevolent. Some of the human races in certain sectors are you wouldn't want to trust because they're controlled by an imperial race or have been dominated long ago in one way or another. So it's a very convoluted thing when you get into talking about the Nordics, for instance, the Nordic race. Some are free. So you have to be a little bit cautious about who you associate with, even human. The preponderance majority, from my experience, that work and live in just a quarter of our Milky Way galaxy, it's a interdimensional alliance. There's over 450 million highly advanced inhabited world systems in that organization. And that's just 1/4 of our Milky Way galaxy. Those are all benevolent world systems. They trade. The people that, I would say that a child on one of those worlds, one of our nearest neighbors, by the time they're age 10, would have the equivalent of 7 to 10 PhDs already. Remember, they have a complete photographic memory, telepathic. Their learning curve, they use 100% of the brain they have 100% of. Why are we told we were use 6 to 10? The only reason that is because certain genomes are shut down. They can access the rest. That's all it is. It doesn't need to develop anymore. It just needs to be turned on. So if you took a group of people from Earth today, aboard a ship somewhere, or just beamed them up, took them to a mothership, one I know that is stationed in the ice rings of Saturn, or in the asteroid belt, and they have the ability to be in a stealth mode where they'd be invisible to reptilian ships or to our astronomical or scientific devices. Because when they're using an anti-gravity technology, if they turn it on, they also found in time, when they first developed this stuff, that it would raise the molecular time rate of the molecules that made up the craft. And if they raised the vibration enough, it would simply disappear from the visual and sonic perspectives of beings using eyes and ears to see them. They wouldn't detect them. Radar wouldn't detect them. It doesn't mean they're not there. It just can't perceive them normally. And they can raise or lower this at will. So it allows them to operate in our solar system and get ready for this transformation in ways that the diabolical side cannot penetrate. In other words, the higher races have technology that the negative races will never have. That's a key point. Higher races don't like to use technology on others unless they have to. But something has to drive them to the point where they will use their higher faculties and abilities to neutralize negative elements. So you might say, the Mayan calendar, which came to an end on December 21st, 2012, some will argue it's later or earlier, it doesn't matter. To the Mayan shamans who know how to read their calendar, there's 500, 550 of them, mostly living in Guatemala. They interpret their calendar that what is coming here is something that they can't put into words. They don't know what form it will take. But they say they do know that the change of one calendar and the end of it, the beginning of a new one, has to do with the end, and I quote, end of evil as an experiment on Earth, unquote. How can that possibly come about? What is this experiment of evil? Who started it? Why did God think it was a great idea to use evil to cattle prod people to grow spiritually? The idea is to get people who won't cooperate to cooperate. But when you get down to the basics of it, in billions of years of galactic history, that system has never done what it was intended to do. And people aren't returning. People aren't getting enlightened. It takes decades, lifetimes for a spiritual master to get one person out of this trap on this planet, sometimes. That's not normal either. Their hands have been somewhat tied because of spiritual laws in the lower universe that are also being changed. This goes pretty deep. It means in order to change the lower dimensions like Earth, physical universe, positive and negative, good and bad, something has to change in the upper worlds that can change fixed and finished planes of creation to become unfixed and unfinished so they can evolve. To do that, you've got to retire an old thing that's like a dinosaur. It does not do what it was meant to do. This is evil. If you retire it, something better has to take its place that will actually work. Now this goes into where this ray came from, that the C rays were first presented within, and how it changed them, why it's affected the Galactic Alliance, why they want to make this move to change this place. Because you and I and everybody we know would love to live in a universe and travel to the stars and have your on field trips to the Pleiades, for crying out loud, or somewhere further, and have them grow up in a place free of fear and lies and deceit. What I'm sharing with you and your listeners is that organization that lives like that actually exists in large measure in our Milky Way galaxy. And people on Earth have been purposefully kept from knowing about it altogether. That needs to change. The hidden leaders need to change. If we're really gonna set this place free, it all has to be changed. It needs to be, this misuse of technology that's gone on so long has to be reversed. And it can be reversed very easily. You could sit in a chair in one of these craft for 1 hour, and you would remember all the lives you've ever lived in other worlds, Michael. It'll all come back to you. It's just an energy field between what's in your subconscious. It's there to keep it subconscious. If you tap out that energy field, it all comes up to the surface. And then with a little bit of work, they can change
Scott,
everything.
we just have about 3 minutes left, so I just wanted to kind of like, wrap it up. It sounds as though you're very optimistic and that we are actually at the kind of cusp of a really radical transformation as more and more people become awakened to who they truly are, that the transformative potential is well and truly having an impact. So how can people kind of like dive deeper or learn more about this transformative potential, and how can they actually help it move forward?
I think first,
in a couple of minutes.
Yeah, the first thing I would say is begin to work with the special vibratory word hue, because it does not come from Earth. All I can share with people until they discover this for themselves, and I say this, if they continue to work with it 10 or 15 minutes a night, preferably before they go into the dream state, where they're freer for a short period of time from this incarnation here. They're not allowed to bring, most people are not allowed to bring the memory back to the physical body in the morning when it awakens as to where they were adventuring, or what they were experiencing. But I can tell you, everybody leaves their body at night. Most people aren't brought up from birth when the subconscious is set in the first 6 years here to remember any of it. They have a devil of a time trying to bring back where they go when their body's in a trance. Pineal gland secretes, I think, serotonin and melatonin to put your body to sleep, but it creates a trance to keep the body running while you're out. People don't know this. The pineal gland also has rods and cones in it, like the physical eyes. But they're designed to see and to know and perceive other realities and other worlds and other dimensions. It's also the doorway, or the third eye, the proverbial third eye, that people go in and out to get in and out of the body at night, and they control the brain and the physical body through the pineal gland. It's the door. Now, this is normal knowledge for people in other worlds. It's just like they grow up with it, and they know how to utilize this and get in and out. Their government people, which are their most spiritually advanced people, know how to get in and out. They know how to talk with ascended masters and master teachers in their groups. They have them fly with them aboard their craft on many world systems, these spiritual masters, as part of keeping themselves clear while they're carrying out this work in the universe. I would say this, have people do the hue this way. Explore the stuff for themselves. That's the most important thing. They get comfortable, take a few deep breaths, sitting in a chair or lying on their back, and then imagine someone or something you love and have gratitude for. It can be a person, place, or thing, just so there's a love element involved. And then just gently send out the hue, because the hue will connect you, the real being, directly into a pure omnipresent energy field that exists in all of the multidimensional universe. We're made of that same primordial energy as individual souls or atmas. We have the ability to plug directly into it and know truth for ourselves. At night, they can do this for maybe, do 4, 5, 6 hues. Take a breath. Hue. Send out safely, show me purposefully hidden truth on a grand, cosmic, multidimensional scale, and the much greater knowing of the expansive love within it. Then send out the hue again. Hue. And people will notice a phenomenon when they're doing this. They'll feel uplifted, warm. They may hear sound, they may see light, they may see into other worlds. But they'll notice that after a time, they'll come to a natural stop. They'll just stop. Then go to sleep and don't give your cares and your concerns for your life one bit of attention. They do that for up to 30 days as an adult. They will have quite phenomenal experiences, and in a safe, protected manner.
That was Scott Lemriel sharing the information he claims to have received from a benevolent group of extraterrestrials, the Ceres. We look forward to having Scott return to the show to tell us more about what the Ceres have told him about contemporary political events in the Ukraine, the Middle East, and the rest of the planet.